Today we're going to do a more in-depth look at the NEO-GEO Bios and how to set them up. We're going to do a test run with Metal Slug 4 via Final Burn Alpha 2012. And once this test is successful, I'm going to show you the 3 different ways you can set up the NEO-GEO Bios. It takes a few seconds to load, which is pretty common with games that are around 60, 75 megabytes, etc. So far, so good.
Okay. Mission 1, start.
And for the record, Metal Slug 4 works great on Final Burn Alpha 2012. It does not work on MAME 2010, however, due to encryption problems, so play it on Final Burn Alpha 2012. Now we're going to switch over to the PC and do a little brief overview of the different ways to set up NEO-GEO Bios. The first thing that you have to understand is that there are 2 different sets of NEO-GEO Bios that are pretty prominent within the emulation world. We have the old set, which works great with MAME 2003 and the old Final Burn Alpha. And then we have the Today we're going to do a little bit more of a more in-depth look at NEO-GEO Bios setups in general, and we're going to do a test run with Metal Slug 4 for Final Burn Alpha 2012. It takes a few seconds to load up because it is a bigger game. It's pretty common to have this type of behavior, so don't think it's not working. It really does work. But this runs great with Final Burn Alpha 2012 if you have the proper ROM set and proper BIOS setup. And I'm going to show you how to do both.
Okay. Mission 1, start.
Now that we've established that this works pretty damn good, I'm going to switch over to the PC and show you the general BIOS configurations. The first thing you need to understand is that there are 2 general NEO-GEO BIOS sets to take into account as far as emulation sets throughout the years. We have one set, which is the old NEO-GEO Bios set, which generally functions quite well with both MAME 2003 and the older version of Final Burn Alpha that we have on the NES Mini. And these pretty much cover games up to about the year 2000 within reason. Then we have the NEO-GEO Bios newer set, which works with MAME 2010 and Final Burn Alpha 2012. The other thing to note is that, for the most part, 90% of the time, you could take a game that's on Final, MAME 2003 or 2010 and just change the command line and have it work just fine within the Final Burn Alpha equivalent of that ROM set. I mean, there's going to be very few examples of games that do not function. In those cases, you could just download the Final Burn Alpha version of that ROM set and use that. But almost every example that I've tested, especially with NEO-GEO, has been just fine. Anyways, there's 3 different ways that you can do the BIOS. If we want to run a MAME 2003 Final Burn Alpha as our predominant NEO-GEO set, I can go into my modules, install extra modules. Now I'm using my old NEO-GEO set, BIOS. And I have BIOS for other systems here too. I'm going to actually redo my BIOS setup and have them where the NEO-GEO Bios are by themselves, so you can install just the BIOS for NEO-GEO and other systems. This is going to come in handy when we're trying to flash games that are 318 megabytes, 330 megabytes for TurboGrafx CD, PlayStation 1, Sega CD. So I'm going to try to more streamline it so there's more options, a whole multitude of options, so we could have as many games as we want or as few games as we want. And you could have a choice of the BIOS you want to have installed. But for right now, if you use my master BIOS old version, you can run NEO-GEO games just fine with MAME 2003 and Final Burn Alpha older version. But you cannot have both the old and the new installed at the same time, because there's code in there, a command line code that will actually replicate the BIOS into each directory automatically. And I'm going to show you how this works in a minute or two here. So we established that if we're running 2003 MAME or Final Burn Alpha old, we want to use the old NEO-GEO version. If we want to run MAME 2010 or Final Burn Alpha 2012, then we'd use the new NEO-GEO. You could technically have your entire NEO-GEO set within the realm of MAME 2010 and Final Burn Alpha 2012, but there is a specific reason I do not do this, because the BIOS are different in size. But I'm going to go into the third way that you can install these BIOS. If I want to have a game that would only work on MAME 2003, well, let's say it'll work on both MAME 2003 and 2012, but if I want to have one from the subset of MAME 2003 and one from the subset of MAME 2010, then I'm going to have to do the BIOS a different way. I cannot have either of these HMODs installed, but I could go into my games directory, and I'm looking at Metal Slug 4 in particular. Right up here where it says the ID, that is the folder that I need. So I'm going to go into my games folder, and I already searched for this, so I'm fine. I have Metal Slug 4 right here, already searched for. So that is the MAME 2010 Final Burn Alpha subset. I'm going to go into my HMOD directory, and I'm going to need the new NEO-GEO BIOS. And right here is 1.28 megabytes in size. Now that's going to hurt when you see why. I'm going to copy this over. So this is without having any HMODs installed. This is just a tried and true fashion of copying it directly to the directory of the NEO-GEO games, then flashing via Hackshi to the Mini itself. So we got Metal Slug 4 accounted for with the new BIOS. Now we're going to get the old BIOS, which is only 236 kilobytes. And we're going to copy this into the Metal Slug from the MAME 2003 set. Now that these are accounted for, old Metal Slug with the old BIOS, new Metal Slug 4 with new BIOS, I can flash over to Hackshi just fine. Right now, I have only the new NEO-GEO BIOS installed, as you can see here. I just have new NEO-GEO BIOS installed, and I'm running Metal Slug 4. I let the BIOS take care of the master BIOS module and the code of the core itself take care of the BIOS. In my directory, I did not have NEO-GEO BIOS, but when I open it via FTP, once it's flashed over to the Mini, it automatically copied NEO-GEO zip into the Metal Slug 4 directory. What this means is, even though I'm using a module that has the BIOS contained in it at one single time, the coding will make every single instance of MAME 2010 or Final Burn Alpha 2012 copy this 1.29 megabyte file over. So it's literally taking up 5 times as much space for the NEO-GEO BIOS as it would for MAME 2003. So that is the predominant reason why I like to use MAME 2003. So in the case where you want to use 2012 Final Burn Alpha or MAME 2010, just for a few games like Metal Slug 4, etc., I would recommend just doing one or the other, or just copying them separately like I just did a minute ago. But hope that helps out, and you have a better understanding that MAME 2003 uses a 236 kilobyte file for NEO-GEO BIOS, and the MAME 2010 uses a 1.29 megabyte file for the BIOS. So you're using 5 times as much space if you use the newer NEO-GEO. But play Metal Slug 4, have your fun with it, and then move back to MAME 2003 for the games you can play on that. I mean, you're going to be flashing this thing a few hundred times anyway. So hope this video helped you out.